warned by the vet not to treat it as a human being, because fundamentally it is a different species, and as much as I try to get a human response from it, it continues to hate me. And that's the fundamental difference that this team never realized, even though they had heart of gold right at the center of their case. But that heart of gold led to a few false assumptions. The first assumption they had was that we were talking about animals in a purely urban scenario, probably because they're urban people, and have seen animals in cages, and completely neglected to look at the impact, particularly the economic opportunity cost and the opportunity cost to human beings in the real world, where a lot of the interaction with animals and humans occur, especially in rural areas. But more importantly, they wanted to talk about the giving of human rights to these animals with the hope that we will now get protection for them. But they never realized that they have to follow through with the implications of giving them rights, including the legal burden that is associated with human rights, as well as the obligation, both moral and legal, that is implemented on human beings. The questions that we asked in our POIs were not frivolous, because these are the burdens that are put on human beings, because we recognize that other human beings have life worth protecting as rights, which is why in some jurisdictions we say it is a sin of omission for you not to rescue someone when that person is drowning, and you can be charged and caught. But they won't do that for a drowning baboon. No consistency. In some jurisdictions, we elevate the notion of right to life to such a high degree that if you take it away, we justify the taking away of your right. And that's what some societies feel. When we ask them, will they be consistent on this matter? No, they won't. They will not actually do anything to that farmer. In fact, if you listen very carefully, we begin to see the fundamental shift, especially conceded in the third speaker, when they said, if such a scenario occurs, we will sue. We sue when we actually have property damage. We sue when we actually harm what is belonging to other people. We don't sue when someone dies and his right to life is taken away. So clearly, we're not talking about the same thing anymore. They never consider the implication. Let's look at the debate in the three main areas of clash that we've seen today. First, are they actually sentient, and are they actually equal, animals and humans? Second, let's actually talk about who better protects the animals in question. And third, let's actually talk about this humane society that we're talking about. Firstly, the assumption that they made from the start was extremely confusing because they kept shifting. On the one hand, one speaker said, we are okay with giving them because they're virtually human beings. So we should just give it to them. They're so close to it, they're like babies, right? Fundamentally, I don't believe they're the same, because babies can be quite ugly, human babies especially, but we'll leave that aside. But the second speaker now shifted and said, no, as long as it's sentient, we can start giving away anything, right? And finally, the third speaker says, you know what, just in case, right, as long as you feel that this token can somehow magically activate, we should give it away. The reason this shifting compass is very, very dangerous is that laws in society often come with precedents. And when you establish that a law is set and that a certain type of right is to be given on a certain type of justification, it must be made consistent. So when we talk about the fact that if we settle on sentient, for example, and ants fill her criteria, we now have to give it in order to make the laws consistent. Yes, sir?
First, it's very unlikely that ants are sentient, but even if they are scientifically proven to be sentient by the competent authorities, then let's give them the rights that we're
okay. In which case, we now go into the second area. By that logic, we've now made every single member of the animal kingdom capable of having human rights. The only capable people who can retreat from human rights in order to compromise, as pointed out by my third speaker, are still human beings. All these other animals don't know that they have a human rights. They will continue to assert themselves. All they find is that magically, suddenly, human beings are not touching us anymore. Right? And what you actually end up is a massive retreat of humanity away from the animal kingdom. And ultimately, that is just not a tenable situation. I wish I could give you somewhat more logical explanation, but I'm just going to tell you, it just won't work. Right? We're going to have to end up putting ourselves in cages, and that's not the outcome that humanity will ever accept. Finally, they started to try to draw some analogies, right? Saying that they're just like babies, and perhaps trying to get some sympathy from us, seeing all the, good fathers and mothers to be in the crowd as well. But we demonstrated very clearly that this is completely non-analogous, because ultimately, babies are human beings and have the definite ability at some point to articulate whether they want their rights, and also articulate the mutual respect necessary in order to make the rights work. All they were able to say was that animals can sometimes express pain, squirm, None of this actually demonstrated the ability to use the right, no thank you sir, and also to demonstrate the mutual respect that is necessary to make the operation of human rights and all rights function within a society. Because everyone exercising all of your rights to the maximum leads to a war of all against war. And that's the Hobbesian principle that's going to be applied the moment you give rights to all animals. Let's look at the second principle then, or area of threat, of harm to these animals themselves. Here, they kept coming back to this idea. We gave rights to women, we gave rights to slaves, and because they were being hurt, and we must now do the same thing. But the danger that we pointed out is that it's actually very, very dangerous to implement laws which are meant for some people, right, and forgetting the unique circumstances that actually surround all these people. There were times when you had laws, especially for men, supposedly, working with working conditions. And when they decided to extend the right to work, they forgot about some of the circumstances that apply to women, such as the need for maternity leave. And therefore, different circumstances are actually hurt when you apply a concrete fixed formula which they intend on implementing in this case. We actually didn't hear any form of response to the notion of a backlash that is going to be created when you try to save these animals. When individuals find their own rights being encroached upon and finding no protection in the courts, finding no protection from the rest of society, have to take it upon themselves to harm animals. No thank you, sir. Finally, let's look at the notion of the humane society that they intend to set up. They believe that if we can only strengthen the institutions of animal rights, somehow we will treat them better. But the cause of this suffering was human beings unable to empathize with the suffering of animals and significantly not viewing the suffering as significant. In putting in human rights measures for animals, you don't actually create empathy because you're not actually asking them to basically empathize with them or to suffer with them. What you're doing is to say we elevate them to the level of humanity and we ask you to respect them. That's not going to change the minds of individuals who fundamentally already don't care about the suffering of animals. If you want to talk about compassion, we must find the specific means necessary, which we've already pointed out in our position, to deal with compassion. This does not, and therefore this giant problem-solution mismatch is going to end up hurting more people. Because they also didn't respond to the final analysis we offered, whereby if you're going to start talking about protecting some animals that you definitely know are close to extinction or humanity or whatever, or babies, right? You are going to have to protect them from others. Because if you believe in the principle that they are virtually human, then we are going to have to take the same measures that we do to protect human beings from tigers and sharks and animals and kill the tigers and sharks and other animals that prey on them. So what you end up doing? Killing more animals. So they had no idea what they were asking for when they wanted human rights for animals. They end up hurting humanity, they end up hurting a humane society, and worse still, they ended up hurting the animals themselves. We are so proud.